In this tutorial, I am going to teach you how to draw a waterfall in different shapes and sizes using a simple step-by-step method with full details. Let's begin. First, I am going to define the edge of the cliff with a few rocks. Then, I'll draw a line with a few curves to mark out the width of the river at the top. Next, I'll draw two light vertical lines for the sides of the waterfall. Notice how they curve forward a little bit right at the top, where the water comes over the edge. Try to leave a little extra space on both sides of the waterfall, just like this. Then, with a darker pencil, I'm using the side of the lid to shade in the cliff face. Since my focus in this video is on the waterfall itself, I'm not going to add a lot of details to the cliff walls. Down at the bottom, where the waterfall is about to hit the ground, leave a bit of empty space, around this much. This will be for the misty area that we'll draw later. Now I'm applying more pressure to make the cliff wall even darker. To avoid getting an unwanted texture from the surface underneath your paper while you are shading, just place a few extra sheets of paper under your drawing. You can see that I am doing the shading in two steps and in two different directions to create a more even and solid tone. Next, grab a piece of tissue, fold it a few times, and just like this, start blending the shading using vertical circular motions. Try to be creative during your drawing process. For example, as I smudge the graphite upwards from the cliff edge with the tissue, I'm using that to create the suggestion of a few trees. And now just a few more details on the cliff and the trees. Now, with an HB pencil and medium pressure, I am going to start shading the waterfall. The goal here is to lay down a smooth base tone without leaving any specific lines or patterns. Look, I'll grab a scrap piece of paper to show you the range of value I can get with this pencil. Using the side of the lid, I'm going from dark to light just by reducing the pressure. See? This is the value or darkness that we need. Nothing darker and nothing lighter. Now, I'll take an eraser and cut it into smaller pieces. For this technique, erasers that create more crumbs as you erase are actually better. Otherwise, your eraser might just smudge the graphite around like a blending stump. Now, using the sharp edge of the eraser, I am lifting out some vertical highlights from the top section of the waterfall. I am leaving very little of the dark shading here and making the very top of the waterfall completely bright. In the next step, I am moving the eraser in a zigzag motion to create a pattern where small patches of light and dark parts appear next to each other. If you feel your eraser is starting to smudge the graphite, just clean it off on another piece of paper to remove the graphite that's stuck to it. Keep in mind, the most important thing here is to leave enough of the dark areas intact. We are not trying to erase all the shading we just put down. Also erase some thinner vertical lines in this area, making sure they are a continuation of the vertical highlights you erased at the top. For the next section, move your eraser in a V shape. You can even add a little zigzag motion at the bottom of these V shapes. It's important that these shapes get larger as you move from the top to the bottom. Now at the edges of the waterfall, erase some upward diagonal lines. Make sure these connect with the highlights you have already made inside the main flow of water. Notice that these shapes should also be smaller at the top and get larger as they go down, but stop creating this effect from the middle of the waterfall upwards. And at the very bottom, where the waterfall hits the ground, lift out some circular areas of light. Okay, now I want to show you the pattern I created on the waterfall in a different way to make it clearer. But this time, instead of using an eraser to create the light parts, I'm going to use my pencil to draw the dark parts. The top area has thick, vertical sections that curve towards the river at the very top. The second stage has diagonal lines going left and right, which get bigger as they move down, along with the sections that splash out from the sides of the waterfall. Then we have all the V shapes, which again get larger as they go down. And finally, the mist at the bottom of the waterfall. Now, let's start darkening the shaded areas that are left over from the base layer in between the parts we erased. But be careful, the value of these darks should be slightly lighter than the darkness of the cliff. I'm not missing any of the small dark patches left between the bright areas. If a dark shape doesn't look right or you don't like it, you can fix it by adding thin or slightly longer vertical offshoots that follow the flow of the water. Continuing down into the second area, I'm finding these small dark patches and shading them in. If I need to, I can adjust the bright areas and the size of each patches by adding short vertical lines. This is because in this section, the water is starting to break up and spray into smaller parts. I'm also adding some very light vertical tones further down because the water particles are spraying out even more. I am leaving larger bright areas and making the shading between them a bit lighter. Using a value as dark as the cliff face, I'm defining small sections on the edge of the waterfall to make them look like they're breaking away. Now, I'm trying to fix the area where the small sections suddenly turn into large sections. I'll add some new dark patches to make that transition in size look more gradual and continuous. And I am going to make some of the dark areas even darker. But remember, none of the shading of the water should be darker than the cliff wall. From this point on, we just need to continue shading the visible dark areas with a lighter value. To create a better effect for the mist at the bottom of the waterfall, add some curved shapes like this, and a few thicker, more curved shapes on the sides. You should draw the waterfall so that its width increases from top to bottom. Here, to create this, I'm making the top part a little bit thinner. Then, I'm adding some scattered diagonal shading to the middle section. On the right side here, I'll show you how to shade the bottom part of the waterfall. You need to shade the areas around the V shapes to make the middle and bottom sections look connected. Take a row of V shapes right at the border between them and break them up into several pieces, just like you see me doing here. After that, I'll just make some final adjustments to the shading and the lines of the drawing. In this part, I'm even creating this effect by breaking up the masses of water into smaller pieces, which of course I'm going to refine with my eraser. grab your razor and cut one end of it diagonally to create a sharp edge. Now I'm making some areas brighter, and I'm going back to the middle section that was either too broken up or too dark, and I'm fixing it by creating bright columns of light that are a continuation of the columns from the top of the waterfall. Now, if you wanted to draw a small waterfall, you would only need to use the pattern from the top section, which is just creating those vertical bright areas. And if you want to draw one that's a bit bigger, you would go up to the second stage pattern. So you would first create the vertical bright section and then small scattered bright patches. To give you an idea of scale, the waterfall using just the first pattern would represent a small drop of about 1 meter or a few feet. The larger waterfall we drew would be more like a 5-meter drop. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I also have tutorials on how to draw trees and mountains, so you can check those out if you want. See you soon.